All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something that, well, let's be honest, it usually only gets our attention when things go terribly, terribly wrong. We're talking about multi-unit plumbing. You know, it's so easy to look around a condo or an apartment building and just see a bunch of separate, independent homes. But right behind that drywall, there's this fascinating, completely invisible structural mystery. It's a massive, interconnected network where your actions, and yep, the actions of your neighbors, are literally physically intertwined. So let me ask you this. Have you ever experienced this absolute nightmare? You walk into your kitchen or maybe your bathroom and the sink is backed up. But here's the kicker. You haven't even been using it. You know for a fact you didn't clog it. Yet there's this foul, dirty water rising up in your basin, and it is definitely not yours. It is so gross, it's frustrating, and honestly, it just feels totally unfair. If you live in a multi-unit building, you probably know this scenario all too well. So today, we're going to figure out exactly why you sometimes end up paying the price for a blockage you had absolutely nothing to do with. There's a quote from our source material that I think hits the nail on the head here. It says, "For multi-unit residents, one clog can feel unfair. Shared drainage infrastructure means blockages can behave like a domino effect." That phrase right there, a domino effect, that is the absolute core of what we're exploring today. Because when you're in a shared building, your pipes do not exist in a vacuum. A failure in one spot can literally ripple right through the walls, knocking down the plumbing stability of unit after unit after unit. So, Section 1, the multi-unit plumbing problem. To stop those dominoes from falling, we first gotta understand the symptoms. And honestly, these symptoms are just your building trying to communicate with you. We've all dealt with a slow drain, right? But in a multi-unit complex, if your drain is acting sluggish, and then you start hearing these weird gurgling sounds, which is essentially the plumbing system literally gasping for air, and maybe you notice the toilets rising before they finally drain, well, you're looking at some major red flags. But the biggest one? Multiple units being affected simultaneously. Even if the backup physically looks like it's starting in just one apartment, if these things are happening across different units at the same time, it is a guarantee that you've got a much wider systemic problem on your hands. All right, let's move to Section 2, how shared drainage systems work. I want you to put on your X-ray vision for a second. Look straight through the walls and floors of a typical apartment building so we can see how this vascular system actually works. You've basically got two main parts. On one hand, you have the individual branch lines. These are the pipes hooked directly up to your specific sinks, your tubs, your toilets. Like if you drop a comb down your own bathroom sink, that's a branch line issue. But then you have the shared main components. All those individual branch lines from the first floor, the second floor, the third floor, they all eventually converge. They empty out into this massive common piping system that routes everybody's wastewater out to the municipal sewer. It's exactly like a bunch of tiny streams feeding into one giant river. And when that giant river gets dammed up, boom, that's when the domino effect triggers. Here is exactly how it goes down. Step 1, the shared main line gets restricted by some kind of debris. Because of that restriction, Step 2, all the wastewater coming from above simply cannot move downstream. But hey, gravity is gravity, right? That water has to go somewhere. So Step 3, it backs up along the path of least resistance. And finally, Step 4, that path of least resistance usually leads straight out of a drain in a connected, totally innocent unit. Basically, a bottleneck at the bottom ends up flooding the neighbors who just happen to share that same vertical or horizontal segment. Which brings us to a really important question. Section 3, common causes of building clogs. So, what's actually causing these huge shared lines to fail? Well, here are the usual suspects. First up, grease and cooking residues. These are basically the silent killers of plumbing. They go down as a liquid, sure, but then they cool into this sticky, gross solid that slowly narrows the pipes over time, kind of like clogged arteries. Then you've got non-flushable items. And yes, I'm absolutely talking about those wipes that claim to be flushable. They are notorious for not breaking down and forming these incredibly stubborn blockages. And on top of all that human error, you've got structural things like aggressive tree roots breaking into the sewer connection outside, or just older pipes where the aging joints are starting to fail. And here is where the critical tipping point comes in. You see, an aging system with a few cracks or misaligned sections can quietly catch debris for months, maybe even years. The pipe is getting narrower and narrower, but water is still technically flowing. But then, a single event happens. Maybe it's a Sunday, everyone in the building is home doing laundry, or someone's doing a deep clean and running a ton of water. That seemingly minor, totally normal event, it becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back. It tips the entire compromised system into total failure. And when that systemic failure hits, human nature kicks in, right? We want to fix it ourselves, which leads us to Section 4, why quick fixes fail. Let's contrast two different approaches here. On one side, you have treating an isolated symptom, like furiously plunging that one blocked sink in your apartment. But on the other side, you have addressing the root cause, which means actually clearing the restricted shared line deep inside the walls. If you're only tackling that isolated symptom, you're kind of just spinning your wheels. Plunging your one visible sink does absolutely nothing if the massive shared main line underneath you is still fundamentally blocked. Actually, blind plunging and quick fixes can make things so much worse. Repeatedly using your fixtures or trying to force water down when the main line is restricted, all that does is push more material into the blockage. It compacts all that debris, making it incredibly difficult for a pro to clear out later. Plus, if you delay and just keep using the water, you are dramatically increasing the risk of an overflow and some pretty severe water damage along the system's pressure flow path. You aren't fixing the clog, guys. You are literally just moving the floodwaters around. So if the DIY plunging is a bad idea, how do we actually fix this? Section 5. Professional Solutions and Diagnostics. When multiple units start reporting backups, building managers have to immediately execute a coordinated response. First things first, isolate the affected fixtures. Residents have to stop adding water to a failing system. Second, call in a certified professional plumbing service. Seriously, this is not a job for your buddy who's pretty handy with a wrench. And third, those pros will arrive and deploy some advanced diagnostic tools to locate exactly where in this massive shared network the blockage is actually hiding. The real MVP of these diagnostic tools is the video camera inspection. Instead of just guessing where the clog might be and, tearing open drywall on a hunch, plumbers can now send these high-tech, flexible cameras deep into the pipe network. It visually pinpoints the exact location of the obstruction. It shows them if it's just some grease buildup that needs to be jetted out, or if there's actual structural damage, like a collapsed pipe, that's going to require some serious excavation. It totally replaces the guesswork with laser precision. But fixing the pipes? That's really only half the battle. The human element is absolutely crucial here. Clear communication matters so much. During a building-wide backup, residents have to be kept in the loop. Management needs to tell everyone exactly which fixtures to avoid, what specific symptoms they should be watching for in their own units, and, of course, when it's finally safe to use the water again. Because without that communication, well-meaning residents are just going to unintentionally make the whole crisis worse. All right, once the immediate disaster is handled, the real work begins. Section 6, Preventing Future Building Backups. These are just some simple, everyday habits, but they act as an incredible insurance policy for your whole building. First, please watch your disposal habits. Absolutely no grease down the drain, and do not flush those wipes. Second, if you hear that weird gurgling or notice a slow drain, report it immediately. Don't wait for the sink to overflow onto your floor. For the building managers out there, be proactive. Schedule periodic camera inspections so you can catch that buildup before it stops the flow. And finally, whenever a fix does happen, coordinate it to make sure the issue is completely resolved for the entire building, not just for the one unit that complained first. So the biggest takeaway from our source material today is this. Knowing how your shared system works is your absolute best defense against a catastrophic plumbing domino effect. Just understanding where the pipes converge, realizing that your branch line connects to a shared main, and acting quickly at the very first sign of trouble, that drastically reduces the chance of dealing with a super frustrating, super messy, building-wide disaster. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over the next time you're standing at your kitchen sink. Because in a shared building, we are quite literally all connected. So ask yourself, are your daily disposal habits protecting your building's invisible infrastructure? Or are you unintentionally setting up the next plumbing domino to fall? Think about it. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep learning.